Sir, please wait outside until we sort this out. The woman's voice was sharp and cold, each word dropping like Stortelstunia. Ethan Carter, 50th and 6, stood motionless. A tall man with broad shoulders, his usual tailored suit replaced by a grey linen jacket and simple jeans. No expression, no reaction. Only the eyes behind his black-rimmed glasses, glasses he never needed to read, quietly watching. Inside, a white businessman holding the exact same ticket and membership status as Ethan was greeted with a smile and ushered in without a single question. And Ethan? Just a pointed finger toward the hallway. Behind him came the rolling of suitcase wheels, the hurried rhythm of footsteps, and the rich aroma of roasted coffee. Ethan stepped back into the corridor, feeling the chilled air from the lounge replace the warmth he had just left. 27 years, building Horizon Airways from a small charter outfit into a Fortune 500 giant, and they didn't recognize their own CEO. Of course, Ethan said evenly, his voice low, not a hint of anger escaping. But in his mind, a decision locked into place. Discrimination has a cost, and today, that price would be steep. 3 weeks earlier, the glass doors of his 40th floor office closed as rain lashed against the window frame like an urgent drumbeat. Atlanta lay under a heavy, leaden sky. Ethan sat at his walnut desk, the tablet screen glowing red with a chart. Customer satisfaction had dropped 13% in just the last quarter. Laura Bennett, 60, the COO, entered without knocking, a privilege earned from over 20 years at his side. "You've seen the numbers?" Laura pulled out a chair, her neatly cut silver bob swaying slightly. Ethan slid the tablet toward her. "Not just down. The complaints are changing shape. There's a pattern I don't like. The board's getting nervous. Mitchell called this morning." Ethan folded his arms. "I founded Horizon when Mitchell was still a junior lawyer running errands for his father. He can be nervous. I'm not." He paused, and Laura recognized the familiar spark in his eyes, the seed of a plan. "We're missing something. The numbers don't tell the whole story." Laura narrowed her eyes. "You're thinking what I'm thinking?" Ethan's mouth curved faintly. "Remember 2005, when West Coast market share dropped, and you went undercover as a ramp worker for a month, threw your back out, and discovered 3 managers cutting corners on aircraft maintenance? Ethan, you're 50th and 6. You're the CEO now, not the scrappy founder anymore. Which is exactly why no one will recognize me. The last time my picture was in the news was last year's charity gala. To frontline employees, I'm just a name on paper." He glanced at the wall lined with awards and industry medals. 2 weeks, I'll fly every main route. No privileges, no VIP lounges, no executive card. And how do you disappear without raising suspicion? Vacation in Aspen, the trip you've been pushing me to take for 2 years. Perfect. Laura crossed her arms and sighed. Terrible idea. But I know I can't stop you. Just check in with me every day. If anything unusual happens, you stop immediately. If this goes wrong, the board will have both our heads." Ethan nodded. In his eyes, the game had already begun. The transformation was simpler than he expected. Black-rimmed glasses without prescription, a naturally grown salt and pepper beard, casual clothes instead of bespoke suits. Tickets purchased under his middle name, Ethan Miles, paid for with his personal card. No upgrades, no priority lanes, just his true membership status. The role, a retired professor visiting friends. Day 1, Boston, Chicago, Denver. Just a few minor service slips. But on day 3, Denver to Atlanta, the signs emerged. Flight attendant Sophia Lane ignored an elderly black woman struggling with her carry. On, but immediately assisted a white businessman 2 rows back. Day 6. Today, he stood outside the lounge like someone with no entitlement, noting every detail in a worn leather notebook. The pen moved slowly, but his grip was tight. A male voice beside him said, "They did the same to me last month." Ethan looked up. Malcolm Price, 50, 7, neatly dressed for travel, noise, cancelling headphones resting around his neck. Sarah, the lounge receptionist, has a habit of keeping certain people out. Been going on for months. Ethan didn't reveal who he was. He simply shook hands. Miles, Platinum member. Malcolm nodded. I fly this route 3 weeks a month. Used to be proud of Horizon. Now, he trailed off. Ethan tilted his head slightly. What changed? About a year ago, when they restructured and brought in some execs from North Star. Since then, longer check-ins for some people, more random checks, upgrades disappearing in strange ways. Ethan felt a cold weight settle in his chest. This wasn't just bad service. This was systemic. He closed his notebook. No one knew it yet, but in that moment, in the middle of the noisy airport corridor, the fate of several people at Horizon was sealed. And then Miles stepped back up to the lounge door, a faint smile on his lips. Excuse me, could you tell me what the issue is with my diamond card? Sarah froze for a fraction of a second. A chill passed through, and it wasn't from the air conditioning. The real storm had just touched down on the runway. The lounge door closed behind him, muting the noise of the hallway to a dull hum. The air was thick with the scent of Arabica coffee and new leather seats. Sarah Jennings, her face the kind of polished perfection you see in a brochure, offered a by-the-book customer service smile, though her eyes never met his. Your card was just flagged by the system. Security verification protocol. We appreciate your understanding. Oh, of course. Ethan tilted his head. And the guest who walked in right after me, also a Diamond member, was flagged too, I assume. Sarah hesitated for the briefest pause, so short only someone experienced in confrontation would catch it. I can't disclose another guest's information. Ethan smiled. Understood. Then please have your direct manager meet me. This time, she couldn't quite mask her unease. Mr. Reed is very busy, but I can make a note. I'll wait, Ethan cut in, his voice smooth as glass, yet carrying the weight of command. 20 minutes later, Thomas Reed appeared. 62, lean but wiry, with calloused hands of someone who had once worked the front lines before climbing into management. His gaze swept over Ethan, his smile carefully rehearsed. Mr. Miles, I'm Reed, Director of Operations. I hear there was a little mix-up with your lounge access. Not a mix-up, Mr. Reed. Discrimination. A flicker of irritation passed over Reed's face. That's a serious accusation. We have a strict policy against any form of discrimination. Policies are only as good as their enforcement. I've encountered this verification protocol multiple times, and it's always applied to passengers with characteristics like mine." Reed's eyes darted around, clearly uncomfortable with an audience. "We should speak privately." The office was small, white, walled, with a dark wooden desk. Reed sat across from him, leaning back in his chair. "Mr. Miles, running an international terminal isn't simple. There are security procedures that just happen to target the same group of passengers." Ethan cut in, his voice no longer mild. Reed frowned. "If you have a specific complaint, you should file it through official channels." Ethan stood. "I'll do more than that. I'll send the evidence to exactly the right people." Reed's brow creased at the seemingly vague statement. But as Ethan left the office, he had no idea Miles was a man who could end his career with a single signature. On the evening flight from Atlanta to Los Angeles, Ethan deliberately chose a middle seat in economy to feel every bit of the cramped, by-the-book experience his regular passengers endured. The cabin lights glowed a pale gold. The engines droned on like an endless soundtrack. The passenger sliding into the aisle seat was Diane Walker, the flight attendant from his Denver trip days earlier. Out of uniform now, dark jeans, grey sweater, phone in hand. He caught a glimpse of her screen. The contact name, Thomas Reed. Reed. "Got a black guy causing trouble at the ATL lounge. Says it's discrimination. Watch for similar cases at LAX." Diane. "Standard procedure." Reed. "Yeah, random security check for that group. You know the drill." A short exchange, but it sent a rush of ice through Ethan's veins. This wasn't random. This was orchestrated. A young flight attendant serving drinks approached, her name tag reading Zoe Mitchell, and gave him a genuinely warm smile. "First time flying Horizon, sir?" "No," Ethan replied. "I've been loyal to this airline for many years." "Well, thank you. If you need anything, just let me know." As Zoe moved on, Diane leaned toward him. "Don't expect service like that for long. The rookies get special training at first. Then they learn some passengers aren't worth the effort." "Aren't worth the effort?" Ethan asked, his tone neutral. "The demanding ones, the difficult ones, the ones who think they're special." "Like who?" Diane hesitated, then looked away. "Just speaking generally." Ethan smiled, but in his mind, he underlined another piece of evidence. When the plane landed, he spotted Malcolm Price arguing with a ticket counter agent. Kevin, 28, polite smile, but avoiding eye contact. "I was first on the upgrade list. Now I'm 12th, behind people who checked in after me." "Explain that?" "The system handles it automatically, sir. I have no authority to change it. If you'd like to file a complaint." "Email customer service." Tried that. No reply. Ethan stepped forward. "Good to see you again, Mr. Price." Malcolm exhaled. "Still on your journey?" "A lot more to do, but I'd like to hear more of your story." An hour in the corner of an airport cafe, Malcolm recounted dozens of incidents from the past year. Each one, alone, could be dismissed. But together, they formed a picture impossible to deny. A system being exploited to deliberately discriminate. "You really think complaints will change anything?" Malcolm asked. "I believe they can," Ethan replied, sliding him a business card with a false title. Consumer Rights Advocacy Consultant. "If you're willing, write everything down. The more detail, the better." Malcolm studied the card and nodded. Not just for me. For everyone without a diamond card to lose. That night, in his Los Angeles hotel room, Ethan called Laura. Her voice came through the line. 3 days of silence, and now you call at midnight. Should I be worried or relieved? Worried. But not for me. For Horizon. He relayed everything. The patterns of discrimination, the link to the management group from North Star, and most importantly, the incriminating messages between Reed and Diane. Laura was silent for a few seconds. Worse than we thought. And it needs action now. I want you to do 4 things. Ethan listed them. Pull all customer complaint data from the past 18 months, get the personnel files on Reed, Sarah, and Diane, review every post, merge a policy, and schedule an emergency board meeting for his return. Laura answered crisply. Understood. And you? I'll keep going. I need to know how deep this runs, and when I have enough proof. He looked out at the twinkling lights of Los Angeles. Some people will be leaving Horizon permanently. For the next 5 days, Ethan Miles moved like a ghost through flights from San Francisco to Seattle, to Phoenix to Las Vegas, then back to Atlanta. No upgrades, no CEO privileges, just a retired professor with black-rimmed glasses, a worn passport, and an old leather notebook. Every destination revealed another slice of a grim picture. In Phoenix, he saw a Latino family randomly selected for additional security screening, the same excuse Sarah had used on him. In Seattle, a black passenger was bumped off the upgrade list at the last minute, replaced by a white couple who had only just joined the loyalty program. Ethan recorded everything, leaving nothing out. Times, employee names, flight numbers. The handwriting was firm, as if carved into the pages. Every page was a bullet, he thought, and I will use them when the moment is right. Not every entry was a stain, though. There were rare, bright moments. James Rivera, a ticket agent in Denver, greeted every passenger with a smile, calling them by name, regardless of their clothes or skin color. Emily Collins, a flight attendant on the Chicago route, gently helped an elderly black woman with an overweight carry-on and patiently adjusted her headphones so she could watch a movie. People like them reminded Ethan that Horizon's original culture still existed, though buried beneath the frost of new policies. By the time he circled back to Atlanta, he had built a thick dossier. 7 clear cases of discrimination, 15 employees involved, 5 of them senior managers, 4 routes most severely affected, and direct evidence, photos, audio recordings, and Reed's incriminating messages. Laura hadn't been idle either. Over the week, she sent him secure files, personnel records, post-merger policy documents, and complaint data. The cold numbers confirmed his instincts. Complaints from minority passengers had risen 48% in just 14 months. The night before his return, Ethan sat alone at the hotel desk, the warm light casting shadows over a face lined with fatigue. He opened his laptop and typed out the plan for Phase 1, Emergency Surgery. 1. Immediately remove the core personnel from North Star who had implemented the discriminatory policies. 2. Restore the upgrade and security check algorithms to their pre-merger state. 3. Convene an emergency board meeting, present the evidence, and push for approval of a full-service culture overhaul. He knew Step 1 would cause shockwaves. But if he didn't cut out the rot, the body of Horizon would slowly die. The next morning, Ethan returned to his familiar image, custom, tailored suit, deep blue silk tie, polished leather shoes. The glasses and false beard were gone, revealing the CEO's face that thousands of employees knew, but none suspected had spent the last 2 weeks crammed into economy middle seats. Laura met him at the office. "Everything's ready. Board meeting at 11. Legal and HR have been briefed about possible major changes." "Reactions?" Ethan asked. "Johnson grumbled about cancelling his golf game. I told him he could explain to the shareholders why he ignored a case that could violate Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Ethan laughed. "Good. Let's see if he still wants to play golf." The 40th, floor boardroom. 12 board members, the air heavy with paper and power. Ethan stood at the head of the table, the screen behind him displaying complaint charts and photographic evidence. "What you're about to hear will be hard to accept, but we cannot pretend we don't know." He began. Images of Sarah blocking him at the lounge, the read. Diane message logs, complaint data, photos of passengers removed from upgrade lists. Each slide was a hammer blow to the polished shell of perfect service Horizon advertised. Johnson interrupted. "Ethan, these are just a few isolated incidents. We can handle them internally without making a spectacle." Ethan met his gaze. "Will you still think that when you learn I was the passenger discriminated against at least 4 times in the past 2 weeks? The room fell silent. Ethan gave a concise account of his retired professor journey, leaving out nothing. When he finished, Marietta Holmes, a veteran board member and former civil rights attorney, nodded. "We must act now. Delay means complicity." Ethan presented his plan. Terminate 17 staff members, review all policies from the last 18 months, retrain the entire workforce, and make a public statement reaffirming equality as a core value. The CFO warned about costs, but Ethan replied, "More expensive than a class action lawsuit, more expensive than destroying a brand built over 27 years. The vote. 10 in favor, 2 against, both former North Star. At 2 p.m., the surgery began. Ethan personally called Reed into a closed meeting room, placing a thick file in front of him. "Mr. Reed, this is a summary of the evidence that you directed and maintained a systemic program of discrimination. I am a direct witness." Reed's face drained of color, his voice strained. "You can't prove intent. Your messages, the policies you signed, data from 4 terminals, they're enough to file under both federal and state law." Ethan slid an envelope across the table. 2 months severance and a non-disclosure agreement, or immediate termination for gross misconduct. Your choice. Reed said nothing. Outside the door, security waited. By the end of the day, 17 people had left Horizon. Some shouted, some walked out in silence, but all knew the door behind them would never open again. Ethan stood by the window, watching planes taxi and lift off into the sunset. Laura stepped in, her voice calm but firm. "It's done. Now it's time to tell the other 24,000 employees so they know why." Ethan nodded. Tomorrow, the story would be told. And from that day on, Horizon would never be the same. At 9 a.m. the next morning, all 24,000 Horizon Airlines employees, from pilots and flight attendants to ground staff and office teams, were instructed to join a live global broadcast. Screens flickered on simultaneously. Meeting rooms in Chicago, cafeterias in Dallas, the executive offices in London, even the Czech, encounters in Tokyo. Ethan Miles stood alone on a small stage in the main hall of the Atlanta headquarters. No teleprompter, no notes, just a focused white spotlight and eyes watching from every corner of the world. He drew in a deep breath. "We have lost our way," his voice rang out, deep and steady. "In the past 14 months, Horizon has allowed behaviors that betray the very core of who we are. Equality and respect for every passenger." Murmurs rose in several locations, but Ethan didn't look away. "I know this because I experienced it. For the past 2 weeks, I was not at the leadership conference in Aspen as announced. I traveled across the United States as a regular passenger with no priority, and no one knowing I was the CEO. He recounted being stopped at the Atlanta lounge, randomly checked in Phoenix, and watching a qualified passenger be bumped off the upgrade list in Seattle. He named Reed, Sarah, and Diane, the same people who had left the company the day before. These were not a few isolated incidents. This was a pattern, and I saw it with my own eyes. Ethan stepped forward, looking straight into the camera. "Yesterday, we removed 17 employees, including senior managers, for participating in or enabling discriminatory behavior. We are dismantling the algorithms and procedures that were abused to target passengers based on race or origin. And starting today, Horizon will retrain the entire organization, from leadership to contract staff." He paused, letting the words settle into the air. "I don't expect you to believe me right away. Trust has to be rebuilt through every action, every flight, every interaction with a passenger. But I promise you, as founder and CEO, no passenger will ever be treated as less valuable than another when they board our aircraft." Signals from across the network came in. Tearful faces of flight attendants in Los Angeles, a ticket agent in New York standing taller, a pilot in Frankfurt nodding slowly. But there were also eyes that looked away, people who knew they had once stayed silent in the face of injustice. Ethan didn't ignore that. "If you have seen what I've described and chose to stay silent, I'm not here to condemn you. I'm here to say that from today, silence is no longer an option. Everyone is responsible for speaking up when they see behavior that goes against Horizon's values, and I will protect those who do." After the speech, the internal messaging system erupted. Thousands of responses poured in. Thanks, apologies, promises. One flight attendant wrote, "I was once told to hold off when I suggested serving a group of African passengers first. I won't stay silent anymore." An IT employee sent a detailed report on how the upgrade algorithm had been manipulated. Laura stepped into the office, setting an open laptop on his desk. "You should see this." The screen displayed an internal poll. 87% of employees supported the new measures. 9% were neutral. 4% opposed. "That 4%?" Ethan asked. "Mostly mid-level managers who benefited from the old system," Laura replied. "Note them and put them in mandatory training. If they don't change, we change them." That afternoon, Ethan welcomed Calvin Brooks, the diamond, tier passenger he had met at the Atlanta lounge. Calvin entered in a simple suit and shook his hand firmly. "So Alan Miles is Ethan Miles. Explains a lot," Calvin smiled. Ethan replied, "Thank you for being honest, even when you didn't know who I was." I'd like to invite you to join our passenger advisory board. We need the perspective of people who've been here long enough to have seen both the good and the bad. Calvin considered for a moment. I'll join, but on one condition. Don't forget the passengers without power, without first-class tickets, without anyone to speak for them. Ethan nodded firmly. I promise. That night, as the lights dimmed in the headquarters, Ethan stood alone at the 40th floor window. In the distance, the runways glowed like arteries pumping life into Horizon's heart. Tomorrow would be a new day, difficult, but necessary. He knew the journey was far from over, but at least the compass had been reset. And this time, nothing would push Horizon off course again. The next morning, the 38th floor conference room at Horizon Airlines was packed with tense faces. Ethan Miles walked in, holding a file over 300 pages thick, the blueprint for a complete overhaul. Starting today, he said, his voice clear. Every passenger, related process will be reviewed. Not on paper, but in the field. We are going to take apart every joint of our service system and rebuild it from the ground up. Beside him, COO Laura Chen opened a presentation slide. 4 pillars of change appeared on the screen. 1. Eliminate and rebuild upgrade and security algorithms, transparent and subject to regular audits. 2. Retrain all frontline staff, skills in customer interaction, identifying unconscious bias, and equality rules under the Aviation Code 49 USC, ACOM 40127. 3. Implement a mandatory feedback mechanism. Employees must report when they witness violations, with whistleblower anonymity protected. 4. Establish a passenger advisory board, comprising frequent flyers, passengers from diverse demographics, and representatives of vulnerable groups. Immediate pushback followed. Do you know how much it will cost to retrain over 20,000 employees? The CFO frowned. Ethan didn't hesitate. I do. About $18.4 million. And far less than a class action lawsuit, a loss of market share, or a DOT investigation. A regional manager raised a hand. Sir, the automated upgrade process is a revenue optimizer. If we change it, we could lose short-term profit. Ethan looked directly at him. If profit is built on treating customers unfairly, that isn't profit. It's a moral debt, and moral debts always come due. 3 days later, the internal audit team began sweeping through the system. Suspicious lines of code in the upgrade algorithm were stripped out. On a technician's screen, one line in the security system appeared. If passenger.ethnicity in flagged list, trigger additional screening. Ethan pointed to it. Delete it. File a violation report immediately. I want the DOT to have a copy. At the same time, live training sessions were underway at major hubs: Dallas, Denver, New York, LAX. In Dallas, a group of flight attendants' role played a scenario. A black passenger and a white passenger both qualified for an upgrade, but only one was offered it. A veteran attendant began to say, "Usually we," then stopped mid-sentence, realizing she was about to repeat the old mistake. The room went silent. The trainer nodded. That's unconscious bias, and if it's not addressed, it becomes a policy and legal violation. The Passenger Advisory Board held its first meeting in Atlanta. Calvin Brooks sat across from Ethan, alongside 3 passengers who had filed formal complaints in the past year: a professor of Asian descent, a white single mother, and a Latino veteran. Calvin began, "We're not here to be a PR cover. If we see Horizon drifting from its commitments, we'll say so, to the press if necessary." Ethan smiled. "That's exactly why I invited you here. Transparency is the only way to survive." But not everyone welcomed the changes. In Denver, a group of mid-level managers whispered that the new policy wastes time and difficult passengers will exploit it. An anonymous email landed in Ethan's inbox. "You're turning Horizon into an ethics class, not an airline." Ethan replied, with action. He showed up unannounced in Denver, wearing a polo shirt, khakis, and a frontline staff badge. For a full day, he worked the check, in counter, handled complaints directly, and proved that the new policies didn't slow operations if staff followed them correctly. By day's end, some skeptical managers admitted, actually, customers are happier and lines move more smoothly. 3 weeks passed, and internal metrics began to shift. Discrimination complaints dropped by 61%. Customer satisfaction scores, CSAT, rose from 72% to 84%. Average complaint resolution time fell from 9 days to just 3. Ethan read the report, his eyes bright, though his voice stayed calm. "Good. But this is just the first step. We need to sustain it for at least 12 consecutive months before we call it stable." That evening, on a flight from Chicago back to Atlanta, Ethan sat in a middle seat in economy. Beside him were a middle-aged black man and a European businesswoman. The flight attendant served them exactly the same smile, the same menu introduction, the same time delivering drinks. Ethan leaned back, closed his eyes, and listened to the engine hum, mingling with the soft laughter of two strangers in conversation. In that moment, he knew the changes were seeping into the very heartbeat of Horizon, quietly, but steadily. The great overhaul had only just begun, but the skies were already different. 1 week after the improved metrics were reported, Laura Chen walked into Ethan Miles's office with a thick envelope in her hand. She set it down on the desk, her eyes heavy. "You need to see this," she said in a low voice. Ethan opened the envelope. Inside were printed copies of dozens of emails, financial reports, and internal meeting minutes. But not from Horizon. In the corner of each page was the logo of North Star Airways, the rival that had tried to acquire Horizon 2 years earlier. The subject line of one email made Ethan's brow tighten. Subject: Operation Undermine, Phase 2, Implementation. He read quickly, each line stoking the fire in his chest. Place more of our people into strategic positions at Horizon. Prioritize implementing policies that create dissatisfaction among sensitive customer segments. Gradually erode brand reputation to lower market value, preparing for the next takeover bid. Ethan looked up, his eyes like steel. "Laura, where did this come from?" "Anonymous sender. Our secure inbox. I've done a preliminary check. It matches several anomalies you and I have suspected." Ethan leaned back, silent for a moment. In his mind, the scattered pieces, from Thomas Reed's behavior to the algorithm changes to the network of new hires, began to form a complete picture. This wasn't just discrimination. This was corporate warfare. "We're talking about at least 2 potential charges," Ethan said slowly. "Violations of securities law and antitrust law, possibly adding discrimination under 49 U.S.C. Sector 40127. Laura nodded. I've already spoken to in-house counsel, but if we want a full investigation, we need the DOJ and the SEC. That afternoon, the lights burned in a sealed conference room on the 40th floor. Ethan, Laura, General Counsel Mark Rivera, and Head of Cybersecurity, Samantha Ortiz, sat around the table. Samantha brought up a slide, a network diagram showing connections between 7 Horizon employees and former North Star executives. Thick lines linked them with dates, emails, and suspicious financial transactions. At least 7 of them are in positions where they can alter service processes or algorithms, Samantha explained. Some payments from shell companies match the timing of major policy changes. Mark tapped the table. If this information holds up, we're looking at corporate espionage, federal charges that can carry up to 15 years. Ethan didn't hesitate. Begin emergency termination proceedings for every one of these individuals. Deliver the evidence to the DOJ. I'm going to call Robert Lane at the Financial Chronicle. Laura frowned. You're going public? Ethan nodded. I'm not letting North Star control the narrative. If this leaks from them, we'll be framed as incompetent and out of control. If it comes from me, we're the company that uncovered it, acted on it, and stood on the side of justice. 2 days later, the Financial Chronicle ran an exclusive front-page investigation. Plot in the skies, Horizon Airlines uncovers corporate espionage network and systemic discrimination. Major news outlets picked up the story. At first, Horizon's stock dropped 14% in one session. But as details emerged about the internal investigation, the firings and the cooperation with the DOJ, public sentiment began to swing in their favor. Civil rights groups and consumer advocacy organizations praised Horizon for transparency and swift action. Meanwhile, at North Star's headquarters, lawyers scrambled. 2 weeks later, the DOJ formally announced a criminal investigation. Some leaked emails revealed North Star had codenamed the campaign Operation Undermine, divided into 3 phases: infiltration, sabotage, and takeover. Ethan read the DOJ press release in his office, Laura standing beside him. You know, she said quietly, 2 months ago, I thought the internal reform was the biggest challenge of my career. Now, Ethan gave a half smile. Now we're playing on a different board, and I don't plan to lose. That evening, as Atlanta lit up, Ethan sat alone by the window. Reflected in the glass was the image of a man who was both CEO and fighter. He thought back to that moment outside the lounge, to Sarah Jennings' look of contempt, and realized, if he had let it go that day, all of this would still be happening. Now there was no turning back. This battle would not only shape the future of Horizon, but leave a mark on the history of the airline industry as an example of a CEO willing to step into the shadows to pull his company back into the light. And Ethan knew the next chapter would be even more intense. 3 weeks after the Financial Chronicle published its article, Ethan Miles sat in the waiting area of the United States Senate Commerce Committee. Gone were the soft lights of Horizon's headquarters, or the familiar bustle of an airport. Here there was only the sound of shoes striking marble floors, the hum of portable cameras, and the razor-sharp questions waiting for him beyond those doors. Laura Chen, seated beside him, leaned in and whispered, Are you sure about this? Some of the questions won't be easy to hear. Ethan tightened his grip on the thick file in his hands, his gaze steady. I'm not here to protect myself. I'm here to protect the people who don't have a seat in this room. When the clerk called his name, he stepped forward, television lights cutting across his face. Senators sat in a half circle, papers rustling. Chairwoman Maria Delgado fixed her eyes on him. Mr. Miles, your company uncovered and dismantled a network of systemic discrimination. What would you recommend to other CEOs? Ethan opened the file but did not look down. His voice carried clearly. First, remember that discrimination doesn't always knock loudly at the door. It can hide in algorithms, in procedures that seem neutral but are applied unevenly. Second, see your company through the eyes of your customers, not just through reports. And finally, once you see the truth, don't put a bandage on it. If the system is wrong, it must be rebuilt. If people are wrong, they must go. Another senator, Thomas Keller, leaned back in his chair. Some say your approach, firing 17 people in one day, overhauling policies completely, was too extreme. Ethan tilted his head slightly and replied, Discrimination is extreme, Senator. The damage it does to communities and to the nation's reputation is extreme. Half measures are what's excessive. His answer drew a brief silence before a flurry of camera shutters. The hearing lasted nearly 3 hours. Ethan laid out in detail charts showing a 23% drop in satisfaction among diverse passengers in just 14 months. North Star's internal emails and DOJ confirmed evidence of Operation Undermine. When he finished, Maria Delgado nodded. Thank you, Mr. Miles. Your testimony will support the anti-discrimination through algorithms bill this committee is drafting. 3 months later, the press dubbed it the Skyline Act, requiring all airlines and major transportation services to publicly audit algorithms, disclose upgrade criteria, and make security screening selection transparent. Horizon became the first company to comply fully, even exceeding requirements. At the same time, the DOJ announced indictments against 6 former North Star executives and 3 Horizon individuals, charged as CO Pot conspirators. Thomas Reed, the man who had once stood so coldly before Ethan at the Atlanta lounge, was sentenced to 18 months in federal prison and fined $2 million in civil penalties. On sentencing day, Ethan was not in court. He was in Denver at a meeting of the Passenger Advisory Council. Calvin Price, his companion from the earliest days of the fight, glanced over. How does it feel? Ethan exhaled slowly, like closing one door. But I know there are many more doors that need to be opened to let the light in. Under his leadership, Horizon continued reform, dismantling old upgrade algorithms entirely and replacing them with the Clear Access system, publishing ranking data and reasons for denial, creating a new role, Chief Equality Officer, reporting directly to the CEO, empowered to halt any policy or process suspected of discrimination, implementing field training where every mid-level manager was required to spend at least 3 days a year working front-line roles from check-in and security to in-flight service. The results came faster than expected. 9 months after the Senate hearing, financial reports showed customer satisfaction up 26%, bookings from diverse customer segments up 31%, and Horizon stock fully recovered, surpassing pre-crisis levels by 12%. Business magazines called Ethan the CEO who stepped onto the floor. But to him, that title mattered less than the sight, one afternoon at the Atlanta lounge, of a black family walking past the reception desk, greeted with a genuine smile, no papers scrutinized, no suspicious glances. Laura once asked him, "Do you think you've won?" Ethan simply replied, "Winning one battle isn't winning the war. But at least now, we know where the front line is." Deep down, he understood. What he had done didn't just save Horizon. It became a lesson for other CEOs that true power isn't in the chair they sit on, but in their willingness to stand up for what's right. And Ethan knew this journey was far from over. 5 years had passed since the historic Senate hearing. At 63, Ethan Miles walked through the gleaming glass corridors of Hartsfield, Jackson International Airport's international terminal. Each step reflected on the polished stone floor. There was no press conference to attend, no camera flashes snapping in his face. Today was a different kind of day, his last day as CEO of Horizon Airlines. But he wasn't wearing a suit. Slung over his shoulder was a grey canvas bag. Inside it, the uniform of Alan Morgan, the alias that had once helped him expose a network of discrimination. "Ready for one more undercover mission?" Zoe Mitchell, his successor, smiled as she approached. She was once the young flight attendant with the genuine smile he met all those years ago, now 42, an MBA from Wharton, having worked her way through every department from operations to flight management. Ethan handed her the bag. "This time I'm not sure who will recognize who. My face is all over those legacy of leadership posters around the terminal." Zoe laughed. "Trust me, when people are rushing to their gate, no one's paying attention to whether the CEO is sitting next to them." 30 minutes later, Alan Morgan appeared at the standard check-in counter. A blue polo shirt, jeans, black-rimmed glasses without prescription, and a neatly groomed salt and pepper beard. He chose the regular line, no priority, watching each move of the staff. There was no hesitation for passengers of color, no "please wait outside" like before. Every person, whether a busy business traveler or a mother with 2 kids, was processed with the same procedure and the same tone of voice. Passing through security, he noticed 2 things. There were no more shady, random checks. Every selection was displayed on a control screen, and passengers were clearly told why. And the service language was consistent. Gone were the curt phrases once reserved for so-called difficult customers. Ethan jotted notes in his notebook, a habit that hadn't changed. His flight was from Atlanta to Dallas, an economy plus aisle seat. The lead flight attendant was none other than Emily Collins, the one who had once helped an elderly black passenger find space for her carry-on, and whom Ethan had promoted years ago. She approached, recognizing him despite the meticulous disguise. "Mr. Morgan, or is it Mr. Miles?" she teased, eyes bright. Ethan nodded lightly. "Let's just say I'm an ordinary passenger today, and just do what you always do." Throughout the flight, Ethan observed. From serving meals to an Asian family in the last row, to helping a white businessman switch seats because of motion sickness, every action was swift, fair, and without bias. The Dignity First rule wasn't just on posters, it had become instinct. Arriving in Dallas, he didn't disembark right away. Waiting until the cabin was empty, he stood to find James Rivera, now Vice President of Customer Experience, waiting at the jet bridge door. James handed Ethan a special ticket. "Congratulations, you're our 1 millionth passenger since the service commitment program began." Ethan laughed, accepting flowers and a commemorative gift. Reporters pushed forward, microphones outstretched. "Was this some kind of undercover test, sir?" He removed his glasses and took off his cap. A ripple of recognition swept through the crowd. "Ethan Miles. Every day is a test," he replied firmly. "Every interaction with a customer is an opportunity, either to uphold our values or to betray them." Zoe skillfully turned the event into the formal announcement of the leadership transition. In front of the cameras, Ethan pinned the skyline badge, the symbol of Horizon, onto her jacket. "The only way to ensure we never lose our course is to put this company in the hands of someone who lives these values every single day." Calvin Price was there too, now chairman of the Passenger Advisory Council. He raised his coffee cup. "You've left the most valuable thing, Ethan, not profits, but those moments when people are treated exactly as they deserve to be." That afternoon, in the quiet of the VIP lounge, the three of them, Ethan, Zoe, and Calvin, sat by the window, watching Horizon planes take off one after another, their white fuselages marked with the silver-blue logo. Zoe said, "Keeping this culture will be harder than building it. There will be pressure. There will be new challenges." Ethan nodded. "That's why I trust you with it. Remember, this isn't the finish line. This is a journey, and every day is day one." Calvin smiled. "And maybe every so often you should still buy an economy ticket, sit between two strangers, just to remind yourself why this all began." Ethan laughed. He knew that as of tomorrow, he would no longer be CEO. But his legacy would keep flying, in every greeting at the check, encounter, every smile on board, and every decision made under one unchanging principle. Every passenger deserves respect and fair treatment. And for Ethan Miles, that was the longest and most beautiful flight of his life. 7 years had passed since the day Ethan Miles stepped down as CEO, yet the morning rush at the international terminal still moved like a layered symphony. Sunlight streamed through the vast glass walls, spilling across the waiting area where groups of passengers chatted in a dozen different languages. Ethan, now 70, his hair more silver than before, wore a simple shirt and khakis, pulling a small suitcase behind him. He wasn't flying today. His reason for being here: Horizon Airlines had just won the Global Equality in Service Award for the 3rd year in a row, a record in the aviation industry. From a distance, he saw Zoe Mitchell, now 49, emerging from a press conference, her confident presence unchanged, her eyes lighting up when she spotted him. "You slipped in here without telling me," Zoe teased, but hugged him tightly. Ethan smiled. "Wanted to see how things run when my name's no longer on the sign." They stood together, looking toward Horizon's check in counters. An elderly Middle Eastern couple was being patiently guided by a staff member on how to print their boarding passes. At the next counter, a young black student struggling with overweight luggage was offered the cheapest solution instead of being hit with a heavy fine. Zoe said quietly, "We've kept every principle in place. Dignity first is now a mandatory KPI, not just a slogan." Ethan nodded. "Good. But you know, culture is a living thing. Leave it unattended for just a year, and it will rot. That day, Horizon hosted a special forum with guests including CEOs, lawmakers, and human rights advocates. The theme, Algorithmic Fairness and Human Dignity in Global Travel. Calvin Price, now 65 and honorary chairman of the Passenger Advisory Council, stood at the podium. 7 years ago, we proved that you don't have to sacrifice fairness to achieve profit. On the contrary, when every passenger is treated equally, revenue grows and market share expands. He shared the numbers. Customer satisfaction up 32% since the reforms. Loyal customers from minority groups up 45%. Net revenue averaging an 8% annual increase over the past 5 years. Ethan sat among the guests, listening. He remembered those early days when mass terminations and going public with the truth had sent the stock down 15% in a single day. But now, Horizon was a mandatory case study at 3 top business schools. Unexpectedly, a young reporter approached. "Mr. Miles, I'm Amelia Grant. I write about corporate leadership. Could you share some advice for young CEOs facing a crisis of values?" Ethan looked straight into the camera. "Don't just read reports. Go and see for yourself. Sit in the customer's seat. Hear the things people don't dare to write on surveys. And when you see something wrong, fix it immediately. Half measures will kill everything." In the afternoon, Zoe took Ethan to see a new project. Horizon Academy, the global service training center, where every new employee must complete an equality and empathy course before their first shift. On the wall hung a black and white photo of Ethan sitting in an economy seat, notebook open, pen in hand. Below it were the words, "See through their eyes. Serve from your heart." Ethan chuckled. "Who came up with that?" Zoe replied, "James Rivera. He's now Director of Training for North America." That evening, in the quiet of the VIP lounge, they met Calvin again. The 3 sat by the window with steaming cups of coffee. Outside, Horizon planes lined up on the runway, their white fuselages bearing the silver-blue logo. Calvin said slowly, "Ethan, you've left something that flies farther than any airplane. A principle no one at Horizon dares to take lightly." Ethan looked out at the blinking runway lights. "A principle only lives if someone defends it, and I trust the 2 of you to keep doing that." As he left the airport, Ethan didn't take the priority lane. He queued with the other passengers, moving slowly through security. A young staff member smiled at him, as at any other customer, unaware that the silver-haired man before him was the one who had transformed the company's entire culture. And Ethan liked it that way. Because true legacy doesn't need to be tied to a name. It lives in the way people treat each other, every day, everywhere. Late in the afternoon, the Atlanta sky wore the golden hue of sunset. The glass walls of the VIP lounge reflected the figure of Ethan Miles, grey suit, deep blue tie, posture straight, yet eyes far softer than in the storm, filled years of the past. Today held no board meetings, no presentations, no media events. There was only one special flight, Passenger Experience Day, the tradition Ethan had started at the dawn of the company's reform, now an annual ritual at Horizon. Zoe Mitchell approached, holding an economy ticket, her smile playfully knowing. "Still keeping the habit of picking the middle seat?" Ethan nodded. "If you want to remember who you serve, Nothing is more real than sitting between two strangers, hearing the hum of the vents and sharing the armrest. Zoe handed him a small card. Boarding pass, legacy seat. This seat will always stay empty, reserved for anyone who wants to experience the journey you took back then, she said. That day's flight from Atlanta to Chicago was filled with the kind of moments Ethan cherished, a Czech, an agent crouching down to speak warmly to an 8-year-old boy, a flight attendant helping an elderly passenger stow a bag without caring what class they flew, a white passenger voluntarily swapping seats so an Asian family could sit together, and being thanked and given a voucher from the airline. Ethan sat quietly, observing and taking notes. Every small detail became proof of what he had always believed. A culture of fairness does not live in policy, it lives in each action. When the plane landed, the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Welcome to Chicago. Today we are honored to have a very special passenger, the man who created Passenger Experience Day and changed the way Horizon serves the world, Mr. Ethan Miles." The cabin erupted in applause. Ethan stood, slightly surprised, then smiled. "I just want to say one thing. Thank you for believing in what I believe, that every passenger deserves to be treated equally." That evening, at Horizon's Chicago office, Ethan, Zoe, and Calvin Price gathered with the core team. On the screen was the latest report. Customer satisfaction at 94%, the highest in company history. Quarterly revenue up 12%. Year over year. Discrimination complaints down 98% compared to 7 years ago. Calvin raised his coffee cup. "Ethan, these numbers aren't just impressive, they prove that fairness is the most sustainable business model." Zoe added, "And it only exists because someone was willing to start it, no matter the risk." Ethan looked around the room. Every face, from senior executives to new hires, carried the light of belief. In that moment, he knew he had passed the ship on at the right time, to the right hands. Slowly, he said, "Leadership is not about having the answer to everything. It's about asking the hardest question. Is this right? And when the answer is no, having the courage to change it, no matter the cost." The next morning, Ethan walked alone out onto the tarmac, where a newly painted Horizon Boeing 787 awaited its first flight. The deep hum of its engines, the sunlight glinting off its silver livery, all brought back memories of the day he founded the airline with only a handful of leased planes and a single idea service that discriminates against no one. He rested his hand lightly on the fuselage, as if in farewell. His legacy was not the fleet or record profits, but the millions of moments when people treated each other with fairness, both in the air and on the ground. Ethan stepped back, watching the aircraft taxi toward the runway. In the wind and the roar of the engines, he heard the principle he had devoted his life to. Dignity first. And he knew that legacy would keep flying forever. Trust cannot be bought. It can only be built through fairness and respect. Ethan Miles proved that true leadership is having the courage to face the truth and make change, no matter the cost. If you believe everyone deserves to be treated fairly, please like, subscribe, and comment Dignity First to help spread this message.